I feel like that introduction was appropriate given that Halloween is just around the corner. It is Cooper, the From the Captain's Quarters podcast, and welcoming back my friend Bill Michaels. He is back. We're here to talk about which we kind of chatted about before we went on here. Can we classify what's going on in Green Bay right now as a dumpster fire? Is it a dumpster fire?
That's probably a pretty good, description. That and the fact that every time you look at a Twitter account during the game, you always see that floating dumpster on fire out of the flood going by from somebody. So yeah, I think we can call it that officially now.
It's been a weird season. I think you go into every year, especially when you've had the two quarterbacks that we've had the Brett Favre era, you have the Aaron Rodgers era. You always go in, despite the offseason drama, which is I'm sure in your line of work, it's always it keeps things interesting during what sometimes can be kind of a lame duck offseason. But you always go into a season as a Packer fan, I think, with an optimism. You look at the division, you feel pretty confident about the teams that you're facing. There's always the argument about the moves that we don't make and the moves that we do make, the draft. I pinpoint one particular play in the first game against Minnesota, and that is the shoulda, coulda, woulda been touchdown pass to Christian Watson. And as much as you go, you don't hit them all, but when you look at that particular play, and then you fast forward through the last 7 games, and you go, man, I feel like that has kind of been the icing on which the cake that we do not get to eat has rested on, because it feels like that was a play.
I turned to Mike Clemens in the press box when that happened, and I said, I hope to God this isn't the play that we all point to say this is the highlight reel of 2022. That's it. And doesn't it feel like that set the tone for everything else that we've come to witness thus far? I mean, it was a game in which they had that big strike capability. Here you go. They could have been right back in the game. Might have been a different game. The place was filled with Packers fans, as many as Vikings fans that were there, and it just was for naught. And you thought, okay, rookie growing pains. Devontae would have had it. Anybody else would have had it. Watson didn't. So now you regroup. How do you regroup? And what we've seen all season long is when this team gets punched in the face, they don't have the ability to regroup. We saw it also when they played San Francisco last year in the postseason. They got punched in the face. They couldn't regroup. Right after the Mercedes Lewis fumble 2 years ago, right after you had Aaron Jones fumble the football, they got punched in the face. They couldn't regroup. That has been the way this team has operated under Matt LaFleur over the last few years. In big moments, they have not been able to regroup. We're seeing it all season long. Spectacular first halves for the most part. Offense gets it going. Then all of a sudden, the second half, defense can't get off the field. Offense can't regroup. So this has become, as you put it, the dumpster fire of the Green Bay Packers, and that's the epitome of their highlight reel.
I don't know if arrogance is the right word to use here, but it feels like because of past successes and because of the G on the helmet, when the Packers go out and take the field, they are the Green Bay Packers. They are the 13-time world champion Green Bay Packers. Here we are. You have to come beat us. That energy that you have on the opposing side, and it feels like it's been that way. It was that way in London. It was definitely that way with the Jets game. It was that way in Washington. Like, the opposing team got this energy, this tenacity, these no-name third-string rookie quarterbacks, people that you don't hear of, spoken about in the national media as big playmakers coming out and making big plays, but they just seem to have a next level of energy that I have yet to see consistently from offense, defense, special teams of the Packers. They're just kind of like, oh, well, we just got, like you said, punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And there's not a retaliation anger that seems to build from within on any side of the football.
It's interesting. You talk to guys about sack dances and all that kind of stuff, and they say, we don't do a whole lot. And you ask them why, and they say, well, we're Green Bay. That's kind of the way they're told, is this is expected of us. If you watch that Jets game, the Jets front line, Quinton Williams was just bringing it. I mean, he was just busting up.
Yeah.
And the whole Jets sideline, like their defensive coordinator's over there with his arms around the guys going, oh my God, you could see him. And the Packers sideline's pretty quiet. A couple of big plays defensively, a couple of offensive plays, and they're just a couple of guys going rah rah, waving a towel, and that's about the extent of it. I mean, it seemed like teams just genuinely get amped up to beat the Packers, and now that the Packers have been kind of exposed, we still saw a Washington team that was nowhere near expected to even win that game, much less come close to covering points and such. And all of a sudden, that sideline's amped up, and the Packers just don't have an answer. And I really believe that you take on the persona of your head coach and of your leaders. Well, your leader is Aaron Rodgers, who's a cerebral guy. He doesn't get amped up. And your head coach is also a cerebral guy who is somewhat milquetoast. You don't see a Sean McVay type being that way, or a Saleh type being that way, or Dable being that way. They're amped up. Now, it only goes so far. You can't be rah-rah guy all the time. You have to be the calm, cool, and collected leader. But right now, out of Matt LaFleur, you're not seeing that at all.
It feels like there's a lot of lather, rinse, repeat over the last 3 weeks. A lot of the same commentary. We needed this. This is good. This is beneficial for this team to face this adversity. We're facing adversity, and we're gonna come back. A lot of talk about having great weeks of practice. Man, we had a great week, best week of practice I've been a part of. And you don't see any of that translate onto the field. A lot of we're kind of we got accustomed to an offense that would come out on the first drive and march down the field and put the ball in the end zone with a great mix in that scripted first 15 plays or whatever the old adage is.
Yeah.
Guys are wide open. I mean, when Matt LaFleur first came into the league, I mean, he was running this offense, and even Aaron Rodgers, I remember him being quoted saying, "Man, it's like the guys are just open. Like if that guy's not open, this guy is going to be open." You don't see that. There's been 3 and outs. There's been, the near pick 6 off the Robert Tonyan bobble from a couple weeks ago. Just these no momentum to start the game, and then they get into a flow. But man, it takes one small setback, a holding penalty, something just completely derails the offense. And a lot of pressure being put on this defense, which came into the season barely highly touted. I mean,
they were considered to be one of the top 5. We kept thinking, okay, last year overall they were right around 10 or 11. You think with Devontae Wyatt and company and re-signing guys and getting Jair back, and you thought, man, your keeper Rasul Douglas, Stokes played really well last year. Jair's one of the best cover corners that are out there. Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt are the 2 guys off of that national championship Georgia defense, and you're just going to roll. And it just hasn't transpired that way. And I think part of it is Joe Barry really started to play scared. You could see that it was bend but don't break, because offensively speaking, you can't take chances because his offense doesn't have the ability to keep up. And I agree with you. After the first 25 plays this season, after the first 3 or 4 games, you could see the offense kind of go, and then it would kind of sputter out. Now I think they've been figured out. A lot of bubble screens, a lot of quick outs. Rodgers in shotgun, trying to survey the field. The thumb's not great, and if all you got to do is make sure that the best 2 playmakers they have, which are right now Aaron Jones, he's your guy, and then maybe Romeo Doubs, something like that, because it's certainly not, Alan Lazard. He's a 3 at best on many teams. And Randall Cobb was having a hell of a season before he went down with the injury, but they just don't have the ability to move the football. They don't have the ability to catch the football. They don't have the ability to block consistently. Sammy Watkins just comes back and blows one last week. It's just been a myriad of issues. And you're right. It's just been a team that after the first 25 plays is milquetoast at best.
And there's a lot of talk about Aaron Jones being, he's obviously, outside of Aaron Rodgers and his ability at quarterback, he's the best offensive weapon that the Packers have. And what you hear a lot of is, well, we got to get Aaron Jones the ball. He's the playmaker. You have a fantastic, side by side with that when you have a guy like AJ Dillon to spell him, or a lot of times they're running that two back set with both of those guys in there, because as Aaron Rodgers said, we got to put our best 11 players out there. But then you have this weird fear, it feels like, when they get behind, or they have a lead, but the opposing team scores, or there's a special team gaffe, that the shotgun, we're in the shotgun, we abandon the run. And I heard you talk about it on your show yesterday or today. We need to throw on 3rd down. Even on 3rd and short, we're running the shotgun. We're running Aaron Jones out, into the flat. It's a weird. He's our best player. We got to get him the ball, and then seemingly not doing those things during the course of a game, especially when things get a little tight.
Yeah, I mean, I respected what Matt LaFleur had to say yesterday about down and distance, because they did have some penalties and it put them in bad down and distance situations. But when you were looking at that 3rd and short and 4th and short late in that ball game, and you've got AJ Dillon lined up in the backfield, but Aaron Rodgers is next to him, you knew they weren't going to hand AJ Dillon the ball. And if you're under center, Aaron Rodgers is, if you've ever just watched his game, he's one of the best play fakers in the business. When he sells it better than anybody. When you're standing back there in shotgun, you take that dynamic completely out of the mix. You don't have that ability. And then on top of it, to throw the football to a guy who doesn't have sure hands to begin with, or has proven over the last few games. They got 11 drops in the last 2 games. That he has the propensity to drop the football. And then you see Sammy Watkins, who's supposed to chip block, and instead he didn't even, hit his guy. He's down the field with his hand in the air. You're thinking, what the hell is going on? And first of all, I agree with Aaron Rodgers when he looks over to the sideline and says, what the F are we doing? What are you doing? The player personnel packages that you're running in, some of the play calls, there's been a couple of times Rodgers has said, I'm not calling the plays. I'm not changing a lot at the line of scrimmage. I'm running what's called. Now, he then backs it up by saying, well, I like it, but, that's like saying, hey, it's my house, but it's a dirty house and I'm not cleaning it, but I'm okay with it being dirty. Well, no, you're not. You'll understand that Matt LaFleur is calling these plays and he's out of rhythm, out of sync. And whether it's because he doesn't have Nathaniel Hackett or Luke Getsy, or he just doesn't understand the situation, or they have been figured out, or he doesn't have the weapons to throw to, or he was right that 85% of the offense ran through Devontae Adams last year. Whatever the reason, he hasn't been able to figure it out.
Is it play calling? Is the shotgun phenomenon that's going on right now? Is that play calling? Is there a fear because of what's going on with the offensive line? Like, we're not sure what's going on with David Bakhtiari. There's a lot of shifting. There's a lot of moving around. We got rookies at right tackle, and there's this constant move. And we talked about the Jets game. You saw how exposed that offensive line became. Is that part of the reason for this? Almost like things are getting a little tough. We're going to be in shotgun for this series, and maybe occasionally come up under center.
Well, I think first of all, throughout the league, you're seeing more and more quarterbacks in shotgun, because it gives them the chance to survey the field, especially when you have motion. You have, say, a wide receiver going into a slot. You're trying to see where the defense is going to be drugged to. You're looking if you're going to see a safety move up or move back. And so there's a lot of adjustments going on, but it also gives you an extra second to get rid of the football for a pass rush that's getting to you. So the offensive line could have something to do with it. But you know what? I was listening to Jeff Saturday this morning, who said, if you're not expecting your offensive line on a continual basis to hold for more than 2 seconds, then why should they? And you're training them to just basically hold a guy for a couple of seconds and then release and move downfield. So if you don't have, like Zach Tom was your best pass blocker this past weekend, as rated by Pro Football Focus. Yeah. That's a guy that's fresh off the bench, fresh off the draft, and your worst one was Elton Jenkins, the guy that you should be relying on. Now, maybe he's still coming back and trying to feel it from his knee injury. Maybe he's a step slow. But right now, there's no cohesiveness. You got guys missing blocks, missing assignments. You got 2 guys blocking down on a defensive end when you're letting the nose tackle bust through the gap between the guard and the center. You're not in sync right now. And this whole thing with David Bakhtiari, you got to fit him in, you don't, then you got to fit him in, then you don't. At some point you got to say, hey, these are our starting 5. And when you're ready to fully come back. Until then, we got to stick with the guys so they get familiar with one another. Right now, the only guy that's played every snap at the same position has been Josh Meyer for the most part. So you've got to get it starts with your offensive line and it trickles out from there. And if I'm Matt LaFleur, that's going to be my concentration this week, is just to get those 5 guys ready for what's about to happen in Buffalo on Monday night or on Sunday night. And I think as Packers fans, we're all going to church on Sunday. We're saying novenas. We're bringing rosaries with us to the game or wherever we're going to watch it. And we're going to pray to God they don't get killed.
Aaron Rodgers had an interesting quote, which I know you brought up today. Guys who are making too many mistakes shouldn't be playing. Got to start cutting some reps. Interesting quote, because when you look around, who is there in the waiting that is ready to step up and make plays? I mean, we've seen this happen with guys that have gone down with injury. When you have Randall Cobb go down and you bring Amari Rogers in, which I'm not sure if anybody is still holding out hope that, the second round pick is going to be their third round pick is going to be this, the next Randall Cobb in the slot. He's obviously not going to be a punt returner
Right.
for very much longer. But who are these guys that if these guys aren't making the plays, who are the people that we need to put in there to make the plays? Because I don't see a lot of,
Well, if you're looking at the offensive line, you look at a guy like Royce Newman, who's just been getting toasted all season, and now you say, okay, your reps are gone. We're going to go with the rookie over moving you around or putting Yosh Nijman in and keeping you over on the right side. So I think in that respect, you can kind of say, okay, we do have a little bit of depth on our offensive line that maybe we can go to. But, the old adage is, look, I can lose with anybody. So I might as well put anybody else in if you're not going to be the guy. And ultimately, it's going to cost you reps, it's going to cost you experience, but ultimately it could cost you money. If you get looked at by this squad over the next couple of years and they have to cut you, it's going to ultimately cost you money as well, because not a lot of teams are going to pick up a guy who was nothing to the Green Bay Packers when they needed him most, and suddenly you're going to find yourself out on the street. So everybody wants to play. Everybody's got an ego. Everybody thinks they were the best at what they did when they played in college. So you've got to have some semblance of pride, but it's just a matter of you have to learn it. I like what he said about taking self-responsibility and saying, look, we can blame the coaches and the play calling all we want, but if we're not executing and we're forgetting to block the guy next to us, or we're forgetting what the play is, or we're rounding off routes and not getting to the spot in time, it all has a trickle-down effect. We all have to take responsibility. I like the fact that Rodgers said, you're damn right that we can still win this thing. You're damn right we can still get into the postseason. We have to be accountable. We have to take our own responsibility. We have to be the guys to kind of self-police. I love that. That's a leader. As long as he's doing it behind closed doors, that's a leader. That's what you want out of him, rather than, just like everybody points to Tom Brady screaming and yelling on the sideline. Now we'll see what this week holds. This is it.
Yeah.
If you go out on Sunday night and you get just waxed, you get beat 42-10 or 42-7, then everybody just believes you're dead in the water and it's over. If you go out and say, play really well, you win, you lose the game 27-24, but it's on the last second field goal, and you went toe to toe with the team that everybody expects to be in the Super Bowl. Well, now you've got a little bit of new life. You got a moral victory there. Or God forbid you win, then everybody becomes a believer again. But what you cannot do is go out and just lay down, specifically in the second half, the way we've seen all season long, and not have a lot of fight until the very end when your back's up against the wall and all of a sudden you come out swinging for a couple of series, and then it's just, too little too late. So they have yet to put a full 4 quarters together.
Yeah. Packers, for the first time in Aaron Rodgers' career, double-digit dogs going into Buffalo this weekend. So there's obviously going to be a lot of chatter, and I'm sure you're on the receiving end of a lot of this, because the trade deadline is coming. And for some reason, there's a belief, and I think there's two logics of thinking here. There's a belief that there's some guys out there you can go and get and give up some draft picks and bring in some immediate help. But there's also the other side of that, where this is not just we're a receiver short. Man, if we just had, a speedster on the outside, we're good, because then maybe it's not just him, but opens up things across the middle. Some of our guys can get open on some shorter routes. But there's also the fact that you also have Brian Gutekunst, who is not really typically known to go out and do much of anything. What is the buzz you're hearing out there? There's rumors about the Claypool receiver out in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Do you think anything happens before the trade deadline next week, or do you think this is, we're going to kind of, as Goody has been quoted as saying, we like the guys that we have?
This is what you're asking yourself if you're Brian Gutekunst. One is, do you believe you're a player or two away?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, now you got to throw into the mix that maybe you have Aaron Rodgers for what, another year, 2 at the most. So you've only the window's this big. It's not like when you had Brett Favre in his early years, or you had Aaron Rodgers in his early years, and you had 10 years of window. You got maybe 2, and are you going to say, yeah, we don't really have the horses to do it, so we're going to let this year go by the wayside, which is meaning now you've got 1 year left, and you've, in essence, checked yourself off the list. We've seen wild card teams get into the postseason and do damage. Hell, the Packers did it back in 2010, 2011. So if you could just get there, And if indeed you find a guy like a Chase Claypool, big guy, big hands, big arms, wingspan, good speed, gets downfield, if you can do that, I would do it. And the worst thing that could possibly happen is let's say you don't make the postseason with him this year, but you keep him for another year. He's already now indoctrinated into your system for a year. So therefore, you can go ahead and maybe hit the ground running with him next year. Or maybe he does begin to take the lid off the defense a little bit. And all of a sudden, you can get some of the guys around him, like a Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson when he comes back. Maybe when you get Randall Cobb back, if you get him back in time, suddenly they begin to open up. And all you need somebody to do is stretch the defense and have some accountability. Right now, if you're a defensive coordinator, who are you doubling? And the other question is, here's the way I look at it is, at the beginning of the season, we had the majority of these guys on paper penciled in. So if Josh Nijman goes to right guard or right tackle, left guard is Elton Jenkins. You've got Runyon, you've got Myers, and Bakhtiari can come back and play. Or Zach Tom, whoever it happens to be. We all believed it was a really good pass blocking offense, that the line was going to be okay. You begin to utilize a good two-back set. You still have them. You still have your tight end. All you're doing now is adding a wide receiver that can maybe give you some, and maybe some of the mistakes begin to eliminate themselves. And all of a sudden, you're not making the dumb mistakes. You're not dropping passes. Suddenly, things become more accountable to the guys in that locker room. Well, suddenly they reel off, 7 out of their next 10,
right,
and they find themselves in the postseason. Well, once you get there, all you got to do is be hot, be healthy, be lucky, and kind of do things in the right sense. All of a sudden, you could find yourself being a dark horse going into the postseason. So I think if I'm Brian Gutekunst, I'm trying to make a deal. And this whole thing about holding on to draft picks and, there is no tomorrow. Once Rodgers is gone, once you've got that big cap hit, once you put Jordan Love in, there is no tomorrow. You're in a full-blown rebuild. So why hold on to that crap right now? Why hold on to unproven guys for maybe a guy that could be proven that can help you right now and possibly get you in as a wild card?
We've talked about a lot of the embers in the dumpster for the Green Bay Packers.
Right?
Bright spots. I mean, you look at a guy like Rashawn Gary, I think, and I've had you on, this program before. We've talked about him. I think when he was coming out of the draft, a lot of question marks around him. Packers making a move on a guy that was injured, and obviously going real high in the draft to get him. He has proven to be one of the best outside linebackers in the National Football League. I think you have a bright spot outside of Rashawn Gary. When you look at this, and maybe our punter, maybe Pat, maybe O'Donnell.
Right.
That dude's pretty money, which I guess which is great when you need a great punt and somebody to put him inside the 20, which hasn't helped a whole lot. But what do you see as bright spots and things that when these guys are at practice and they're in the locker room, they're looking at film and they go, I feel good about this, this position, this group, like where are the bright spots on this team? So you have at least some energy to build off of.
What sucks is that you have bright spots. There are. When you look at what Jair's been able to do, Stokes has been able to do, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt's now getting reps. Kenny Clark has been pretty solid up front for the most part. They've all had really bright moments. They just haven't put it all together. Mm-hmm. And even the offensive line at times has opened up a hole. Aaron Jones has had big runs. A.J. Dillon, he's been grinding it out north-south, not big, yards per carry, but he's been able to do what he's done in the past. But they just haven't put it together. It seems like there's this puzzle of this stack of pieces, and you got a couple of them that are together. You kind of know the direction you should go, but the rest of them are just a jumble in a pile, and you haven't put the pieces together. Well, the problem is you're running out of time. Mm-hmm. So you got, you're trying to put a piece, in once a week when you really need the puzzle done by now to say, okay, we've got it. We figured it out. Now we just begin to roll. Because what would you change? You would obviously like to add weapons on the outside. That's a given. But, Romeo Doubs is going to continue to get better. Christian Watson, at least you would assume with the talent that he has or the ability that he has, will get better. Randall Cobb, who knows what he's going to be when he comes back. If he's a shell of himself because he had a hell of an offseason with workouts. But, does Sammy Watkins continue to ingratiate himself to Aaron Rodgers? Does Robert Tonyan continue to get better? Does Mercedes Lewis give you the possession? There's a lot of good puzzle pieces. It's not a bad team. It's just a team that, I go back, I looked at it not to the same level of success or talent, but remember when the Philadelphia Eagles years ago, Andy Reid's last year, put all these pieces around Michael Vick, and they were going to be able to, that was when Cullen Jenkins left after the Super Bowl and went to Philadelphia, and they put all these pieces together of these just high dollar athletes, and it just nothing worked. It was just crap. I kind of get the sense that this is what this team is. They've got a really good team. They just need something to bring it together. And I don't know what that is. I mean, if it's not your head coach and your leadership, what is it? So I mean, do we look at Nathaniel Hackett and go, my God, he must have been the brain trust behind all of this? Or do we look at Devontae Adams and say, he really did constitute 85% of the offense in some way, shape, or form? And defenses had to send 3 guys after him, thus opening up everybody else. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I just know, it's the Supreme Court years ago said, we can't tell you what's pornographic, but we know it when we see it. I can't tell you if this is a good team or not. I'll know it when I see it. Right now, it looks completely dysfunctional.
And not a good time to try to become functional when you have a big, would you call it a season-defining, game on Sunday night? You're taking on, you talked about how Buffalo is just probably the best team in the NFL, definitely Super Bowl favorites, a team that is the puzzle that is completely put together. They have all the pieces, and it seems like, Josh Allen has really, become that superstar quarterback that now fits, I think, in the echelon. When he's, I guess a couple of years ago, he's talked about Brady and Rodgers. Josh Allen has worked his way into that. This is an amazing test, and it makes you wonder when you go into 3 previous weeks of teams that you were in theory on paper going into, you thought, this is our run, and then we have a big showdown. These 3 games we're going to get ready for that Buffalo game, and you saw 3 weeks in a row exactly how that panned out. Is this the make or break for this season, and do you see changes one way or the other in this organization after Sunday night?
If this goes bad and this team looks like they don't have any fight and they don't care, it would not surprise me if Mark Murphy made a move. I would be somewhat surprised, I guess, because of the success of Matt LaFleur, but I think I don't expect that. What I'm expecting is a very hard-fought game. I don't expect the Packers to win. I don't think they have enough horses, but I expect a very hard-fought game to where we can look back and go, okay, it sucks they lost, but this was the good stuff. This is what we saw. This is what we've kind of been expecting. And as the season goes on, maybe if these 2 teams meet up in a Super Bowl, they'll be able to get them. But if you don't see that and you don't have that expectation and you think this is just going to be, again, another match thrown into the dumpster fire, then why would you keep Matt LaFleur?
Yeah.
Granted, he's had success, but he hasn't had deep postseason success. And so I know Aaron Rodgers, it's a tale of 2 different coaches because he wanted Mike McCarthy gone. Right. We know that. He was done with that. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be to the point where it's like, Matt, your message is falling on deaf ears. We need somebody else. And then but I don't expect things to change because they make a move. But what I would expect is somebody else, like a Sean Payton type, to then be looked at very seriously to come in and take this thing over for the next few years. Now, Sean Payton could say, you know what? I don't know about whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to be the guy for the next 2-3 years. So why do I want to come in and coach Jordan Love? Why do I want to move to the cold when I could possibly be going and taking Mike McCarthy's job down in Dallas before it's all said and done, or be comfortable in a studio making millions? So, there's no guarantee there. But, at that point, what positive is there? Because if it doesn't look like it's going to go back on the track, all you're doing is asking Matt LaFleur to hold the anchor while the rest of the ship sinks.
Yeah. Good stuff, Bill. I do want to get you out of here on a Badgers question. I had a chance to go down and because there is some optimism in Madison. I had a chance to go down for the homecoming game on Saturday and have been to games at Camp Randall with Paul Chryst as head coach. There is, and Jimmy Leonard, who is from literally an hour straight north, and then you have to go on some country roads, and then there's a dirt road. Right. And then you drive through a couple of pastures up in Tony, Wisconsin to get to where he's from. But the energy on that sideline with Jim Leonard as the head coach was very apparent during that game. You can feel it inside of the stadium. Also, it was homecoming, so there could have been some additional bevies that may be added to that. But how do you feel about? Obviously, he's got the interim title right now. But how do you feel about Jimmy Leonard and the job he's doing with the Badger team that looked pretty good against Purdue on Saturday?
I get the sense that he's got the job, but what I want to see is stacking success back to back.
Yep.
You can't win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, look good, lose one, look really bad. You know, the way they did against Michigan State. I really thought that Purdue would have been their third win in a row, and that he would have re-energized it. And it did look good, and it did look energized. I just want to see the stacking of success. And also, then, as you start to talk to people behind the program, you also ask, okay, does he have his arms around recruiting? Does he understand that they have to expand that recruiting department? Because no matter what you do on the field, and as good as you can be as a coach and coach guys up, you got to go out and find additional talent. And right now it's trying to get guys out of the portal, trying to get guys to come and take a look at the program, put yourself back on the map in that sense, and then you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, it's just you've got maybe a bad hand that's been dealt to you. And if you coach it up to actually give yourself the end of a season where you can say, okay, we're proud of this because we put ourselves in a position to be successful and a position to possibly win the West, perfect. But if it just goes one off, one down, one off, one down, and the next thing you know, you're sitting, looking at, the Duke's Mayo Bowl by the time it's all said and done, then is he much better than what you had in Paul Chryst? Because is he better a coach? Is he still a better defensive coordinator? Because Paul Chryst probably would have done the same. Yeah. So you don't know where the message is. But I think it's Jim Leonhard's job to lose, and I think they're going to keep him at the end of the season. I just look for them stacking success. That's what I want to see right now.
And on a positive note, hey, the Bucks.
2-0. Tomorrow night, Brooklyn coming to town, though. So that's going to be interesting because Brooklyn, I'm not going to say that I believe they're a pick that's going to come out of the East, but at least they could be that stumbling block that you could trip on a couple of times. Yeah. So I want to see how they match up against Brooklyn because Brooklyn beat them pretty handily here in the preseason. That was obviously, Giannis didn't play a ton in that game, but I want to see what Brooklyn does and how the Bucks respond coming up on Wednesday night.
It's interesting watching Wisconsin sports fans at this juncture in time because you used to have, in years past, you were maybe still watching the Brewers play, trying to make a postseason run.
Right.
Badgers were doing Badger things. You're like, hey, maybe Rose Bowl, maybe Big Ten championship. And you were looking at the Packers going, man, your mind was already in the playoffs.
Yep. Like, well, how is it right now if you're a Brewers fan? And I am. And I tweeted this out the other day. Watching the Phillies celebrate an entrance into the World Series, knowing you were just a couple of games behind them in the wild card, and going back to April and May when a couple of those games get pissed away, and it's a long season. And I kept screaming at my television, screaming at my radio, saying that game's going to matter. And if you stack 3 or 4 of those games together, it's the biggest difference between being on the outside looking in and actually being in the postseason and just getting hot at the right time. Not to say that the offense would have, because you don't have a Bryce Harper-esque guy sitting there, but at least we would have been talking about the possibility of postseason baseball, and then we would not have seen the Philadelphia run as destiny would make it. We would see a Brewers run, and could they, face Josh Hader? Could they have done something different? Which that Josh Hader trade still sits wrong with me. But it's just one of those things as a Brewers fan, you're going, had they just gotten to the postseason and maybe gotten hot at the right time, maybe we'd be sitting there right now.
I'm watching that Bryce Harper home run though in the bottom of the 8th the other night. That was somebody put Chariots of Fire behind it, like in slow mode, the whole thing. It was like, I don't even care, but this is just emotional. But fun stuff to watch. Bill, always a pleasure to have you on, and hopefully we're getting you back on here in a couple of weeks. We're talking about, oh my gosh, the resurgence.
Yeah,
they made the moves and they found the passion, but right now it's a lot of Packer fans hoping that. Which I will coin your quote from today, are not going to bed at halftime on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. I'm hoping the next time you and I talk, I'm literally not sitting in front of a dumpster. Just to say the metaphor has come true. It's on fire behind me. I'm keeping Toasty next to it, and that's the end of it.
I'm gonna get a green screen back here, and I'm just gonna have just throw matches back behind it. And, Bill Michaels, always a pleasure, my friend. Enjoy, and we'll catch you on the air, and then again, be watching on Sunday night with anticipation. I don't know.
Hopefulness. Bring your rosaries.
Fingers crossed. Yes. Maybe go to the 8:30 and the 10 o'clock on Sunday.
Exactly. Yeah. Double up.
Bill, always a pleasure, man. Looking good as always. We'll be in touch.
All right, bud. Talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. The Bill Michaels on the program talking about all things Green Bay, a little Badger talk in there as well, and the Bucks at 2-0. If you're looking for something, looking for a bright spot, there you have it. Of course, you can always check out the show will be replayed on all the streams that we're on right now, which is on the Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch as of right now. And then the podcast audio will be available later on today. So always a pleasure. And as a Packer fan, as you can see, I got got the flag posted back there. Man, Sundays used to be something that you looked forward to. You know, you were like, man, I can't wait to get in and watch the game and watch the Packers and they're going to win big. And you felt like we had a 3-game streak there where we were just going to dominate, and none of that happened. And you're starting to see the fabric being torn away at the seams, and you hope, as a longtime Packer fan we've been able to stack those successes over the past, I don't know, 2.5 decades, that this is not the restart of the Randy Wright era. And if you remember that, here's to you. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be back again to do it very soon. Trails, we're having guests on in a couple weeks. Watch the socials for all that. Enjoy your night. We out.